check in and just throw some topics up on the board for discussion if there are any. Otherwise, I've got my list of stuff like um, iOS, Ocean Protocol grant. Crystal, do you want to chime in?
Yeah, things are good. Just I'm trying to do work, but at the same time, my brain is like, yeah, I don't want to do any work right now. Like the only thing I seem to
All right. All right. Well, that's the opposite of me. So it's
there you go. Balance.
well, I can't do work and I can't talk. So the or any data ownership related news this week that you think is relevant?
Top of my head,
Like,
kind of sucked into the tornado cache thing again after reading Eric's article this morning. I'm like, damn. Obviously.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
That and actually the stories about the I think it's a mother and daughter in Nebraska, or there's an incident in Nebraska, private messages, and gave it to the authorities for abortion cases for the daughter. The daughter's involved. There's two women involved in that. So that's
I saw that. Yeah. Summit, how's it going? Good.
I would throw on the agenda kind of what are we saying to consumers? What data of yours is downloaded? I know that you know, and I know that it's written in a couple of places, sensor data, health kit data, et cetera. What should the user expect from monetization? I think that then further branches into two more questions. How much might I, as a user, expect to get? And who's accessing my data, in what fashion, in what format? I think whether it's MyTiki or Pogo or Squash or Republic, everybody is sort of vague in what's happening. And I think that that's just not going to scale very well. I mean, how can someone just say like, yeah, take my data? Like, I have no idea where it's going, where it's being bundled, or what I'm going to get out of it. So I think that strengthening both of those kind of questions or areas of information would be helpful. And then maybe we can be helpful to you in brainstorming how to potentially prioritize existing features or come up with new features, capabilities, and things to do.
Great. Good points. Okay. John, you able to chime in?
Yeah, I'm just trying to get my computer not overloaded. But I like that article that you posted about the psychography or psychography. I'm not sure how to pronounce it correctly. But, biometric psychography and large language models and the amount of mass data that's being collected. And then your comment below it where you said that's why you have the hyphen in the name re-public, and we need to think what it is to be in a public space or community when most of our personal information can be inferred from simply looking at us, and just the amount of passive data that's collected and put up there. And it just made me think about the idea of data as a common good and a public good. And Republic kind of acting as a repository as a kind of almost a public data park in a way. Mm-hmm. If people wanted to offer it up for free, they could, but as long as they know where it's going. Yeah. So it's just kind of what came to mind. It wasn't really totally what the article was about, but it made me think of that. So, but good topic.
Yeah,
I wanted to
totally.
talk about it later on, maybe tomorrow morning or Sunday morning, but I wanted to kind of talk about it with you guys to see if there were some key points that maybe I should bring up.
Cool. Hey, Eric, how's it going?
Is this headset working? You guys hear me?
Yeah,
Good,
looks
good. I'm,
cool too. Futuristic.
you know me, futuristic and off the grid.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm behind. I haven't heard anything until like the last 30 seconds.
Oh, no problem. We're just going around check-in round, and then people throwing out topics for discussion for agenda. So, so just how are you, and do you want to talk about anything specific?
I'm hanging in there. Yeah, I guess I'm looking to get caught up from missing last week more than anything.
Okay, cool. Hey, brother. This Corey's my brother-in-law for people who don't know, but good to see you. How you
Hey,
doing?
sorry I'm late. Yeah, Corey hanging in. Much like Eric looking to get caught up, I haven't been able to make the last couple meetings, so I feel like I have a lot to catch up on, and happy to be here this week.
Okay, cool. Thanks. Yeah, it's hard to kind of summarize the discussions of the last 2 weeks, but I did just post the recording of the town hall from last week. John stepped in and recorded that one because Phil's out right now. But yeah, I'll do my best to. I'm gonna do a blog post update newsletter thing later today, so I'll kind of summarize what's been going on there if we don't cover it. I guess the kind of housekeeping stuff. Trying to get people onboarded for the iOS. The next iOS version seems to be all right for like me and Phil have tested it, but it's on test flight, and a few people have said they wanted to test, but it's kind of convoluted right now. I haven't done the thing that gives you the public link, so there has to be like a bunch of invites sent and acceptance and whatever. So might just push that out if I can't get people testing it. And then I guess the news of the week was we got the Ocean Protocol grant, which is the first. It's for like the introductory 3K grant for basically like preliminary integration, letting people use Ocean Protocol as one of the places that they can share their data. So Ocean Protocol, I mean, part of the grant is for me to like get my hands dirty with it and learn more about it. But as I understand it, it's got a marketplace component for like static data sets. So like maybe one thing the app could do is like help you compose like a static data set offering and then put it on to an ocean marketplace. But then they also have an environment situation where you can put your data and then queries can come in, and but your data is never actually like shared, like the raw data isn't. So I'm interested to get my hands dirty with that. I should come up with a different metaphor than hands dirty, but let's see. That's kind of all I had, and then if we have time, we can talk about what the next features are that I'm kind of working on with the app. Oh, I should say, and Corey knows a little bit about this. We're partnering with a company called Agora that is going to help us with our health kit data and just general health data. They're bringing some differential privacy algorithms and secure multi-party computation frameworks, and they're going to help us get through some health compliance, at least in the EU, as far as like the certification you need to be like an app that handles health data. And in return, they're just going to like fork the mobile app and kind of rebrand it for themselves to have it just focused on health data for them. And so that's kind of started back up, and I had a call with them this week to kind of go over the nuts and bolts of that integration. So I'll also be working on that. Yeah, do we want to Summit? I like what the things that you brought up and seem pretty discussion worthy. Sorry, Corey, were you here when Summit went over that? What he was talking about? He's talking about we should discuss the data that is downloaded from like in the public app and how to make that clear to users. Is that right? Summit, and then and then how we can better communicate like what users can expect from monetization. How much might they be looking at, and then how is it being used once it like leaves the device. And what comes to mind for me just off the bat is I'm on a call with Radical Exchange. That's kind of like working group with it's more like academic people who are kind of talking about these things. I talked about the data stations that kind of came up in one of those calls a few town halls ago. And have you heard of OpenMind?
I have not. What is OpenMind?
It's like an organization. They're trying to develop software that allows like AI models to be trained without like divulging personal information from the data set that it's being trained on. And I think one of the people from OpenMind is on that call, and he's talking about being able to audit that whole trail from like wherever your data is used, like through any models, through any servers or whatever, kind of fingerprinting that data or wrapping it in something that can like make a call back to home base from wherever it is, so that you can kind of trace it. Is that something that's on your mind when you bring up like telling users how it's being used? Because like ideally they'd be able to like see all their data that's out there, right, that's being used and in what way it's being used, and not just like we could try and tell them like up front, well, this is what this person says they're going to do with it, you know, but until we have some sort of like monitoring or fingerprinting or auditing, I'm not sure we can, you know, really.
No, I think that, I think of it as a crawl, walk, run. So the ultimate, and I have heard a little bit about that idea before. I didn't know that group that you mentioned. I'm really interested in it. If you could send me a link or two, via DM later, that'd be awesome. The ultimate is the ability to exit a system. So can you actually say, hey, I've given access for the first year or for 1 year, and then later on, I don't like where that organization's going. I don't like what they're doing with my data. They've turned into a Cambridge Analytica, and I want to pull my data out. That's, I think, the holy grail. That is very, very hard to do, and I think it'll take quite a few years for us to get there. So if that's the ultimate, which is that you know where it's going, you have meaningful, practical ability to control and grant access and to withhold access, fine. What about just coming all the way back to the present, which is, can I just know if I click the go button, which is go monetize my data, who's going to bid on it? Who's going to buy it? I'm okay with it if it's a one-stop shop right now, like it just goes away and like it's done. Let's just know that for right now. So I guess that's where I would start, because I think in multiple of the apps, it says, hey, people can bid on your data and they can buy it, but you just have no visibility into what that means. So even if it weren't specific, like these are the 3 times your
Non,
data
aujourd'hui, il y a
was
20
bought and
minutes de
sold.
starter le Zoom. Mais
Hey, Philippe, would you mind going on mute? Oh, thank you. Even if you didn't know specifically when your data was being bought and sold, to just know who are the actors in the marketplace. Like, these are the 20 companies that made data purchases last week. Like, let's just start from something totally static, totally generic, that just begins that baby step towards the full eventual control.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that. And how does that relate to you for there's the informing about control, but then there's like giving the power to dictate what terms your data, you're comfortable with your data being used, like in what forms, like can it train models, can it train commercial models, can those models be used in certain ways, like that sort of thing.
I think that there's a nice analog that we're all familiar with. And it took a long time to get to where we are with that analog, and it's very effective now. And that analog is, I can log into Google, I can give access to my calendar, I can give access to my Gmail, I can give read-only access, I can give read-write access, I can give read-write delete access, I can give read-write delete impersonate access, right? There are services that say, hey, let me have access to your email account, and may I send a message on your behalf? Now, they're not going to run around impersonating me, but they have asked for the ability to send a message as if they are me from within my system, and I can selectively give and revoke that access. So I just needed to get onto a Microsoft Teams call, which pains me, and I can't get that group to stop using Microsoft Teams. And I needed to be on video, and their stupid browser support is horrible. So I had to like hook it all up to Gmail and give access to Gmail, which I did for the duration of the call. And as soon as I was done with the call, I went in and I just hit delete. It took 10 seconds and it was off. Like that, I think, is a pretty decent model for something that works at large consumer scale, that's understandable, easy to do, takes 10 seconds to get in, 10 seconds to get out. And so it's not perfect. It doesn't cover all of our use cases. Our use cases are more complicated, but I do think that at least it's like a good analog for 80% of the way there. It's meaningful, comprehensible, consumer grade on-off access control.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a good place to start, and we can definitely like port over useful like UX from Web 2 that's already like people are familiar with. But I do eventually want to, why this always like leads back to education for me is like if I tell like my mom, who's occasionally on these calls, if I tell her that like she shouldn't share her data with this place because like they're going to train machine learning models on it, like she doesn't really know like what that means like in a way that I do. And so there's so much like technical like weird stuff that can be done with data that might seem commonplace to us, but like your average person doesn't even have the mental models to realize what's at stake for them as it kind of like goes through the process of like going over here and going over here, and like these people want it for this, but like why do they want it for that, like what's their business? And so it's like the way you frame that question of like, do you want this to happen with your data? If you just say like are you okay with it being used commercially, like that's like
very broad.
Yeah, and like the answer is probably like in some ways but not others. And so you don't want to like make somebody laboriously go through and like approve everything, but I think there's like a UX story to be told there where like as the people who understand this stuff, it's our job to take that complexity and then simplify it into like a reasonable UX. So it's not just like we can start with read, write, delete, and that's good. That's like, what can somebody do with this physically in a way? But I think we have to get to like some sort of primitive of like that instinct where like if you hear this is being done with your data, like you don't like that. Like that sounds that sounds invasive, that sounds bad, and like allowing people to kind of outline their comfort zone, whatever, in a meaningful way that's not just like itemized like AI, like machine learning, like blah 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 blah, because those terms don't really like mean anything to people.
I think it's also the wrong axis. I think that as there are more and more entities that make use of a person's data, I can think of two ways that would be easy-ish for a user to express their intention and will that I hope would be scalable to consumers, ordinary consumers. The first way would be someone else who I trust. Like, I trust Joe Rogan. So whatever Joe Rogan says is okay to do with my data, like that literally becomes a whole slew of yeses and nos, like whatever Joe Rogan thinks, or I trust the Democrats, or I trust the Republicans, or I trust my local, like there are going to be people just like now who kind of effectively tell people what to think. I trust Tucker Carlson. Like, look, people on all sides of the spectrum are going to trust different people. And that kind of trust in a third party authority can very much be translated into yes, Cambridge Analytica, or no, Cambridge Analytica. I mean, there are people who supported Cambridge Analytica. 50% of the country absolutely wants their data to be used for Cambridge Analytica modeling. And I guess it's not really our place to say yes or no to that. We're just here to kind of make the tools rationally and realistically usable. I think the second one would be, and this is using an analogy to fair trade coffee, like you kind of want to know what the ecological or political or sociological implications are. So maybe you could say, hey, I'm okay with my data being used in models that benefit companies that fit a certain set of criteria. Like they're certified X, they are proven Y. And as long as those things remain true, and so now we're relying on third parties, just like you do with fair trade. Like, do you really know that the coffee farmers are being paid fairly? No, but there's this seal with branding and education behind it that says, yes, they are. And it's called fair trade or fair labor or fair wages, like all kinds of certifications and seals. And so you can basically subscribe to a bunch of seals and say, I'm okay with my data being used by an entity as long as it has a certain set of seals. And if it loses a seal, like an EFF seal or an ACLU seal or any other kind of seal that's been applied to that organization, then I effectively automatically want my data to be withheld. And so that's a different way. Rather than voting with a Tucker Carlson or a Kamala Harris or whoever you want to trust, you're kind of voting on a whole bunch of organizations who are in the business of bestowing seals. And I think that is loosely analogous to what happens in the real world. Like when the ACLU or whoever you trust tells you that an entity is bad, you try to vote with your dollars or your purchase behavior or your recommendations or your voice with or against that entity on the basis of that recommendation that's made by an organization that you trust. So those are my two thoughts. And I know John was about to say something.
I was just looking at the Ocean Protocol Marketplace dashboard. And again, last week I talked about the necessity of a good dashboard for people to be able to visually see something that's super simple, to see where their data is going, to, like you said, toggle yes or no. And are you saying, can you link to that? It's on my laptop.
Okay, no worries. Didn't mean to interrupt you.
Yeah, no, it's okay. But yeah, I mean, Ocean Protocol has a tokenization process where people can upload their data and put it on the marketplace. And then whenever that data is downloaded, they get, the person who put their data on there gets Ocean Protocol token. And then the people who downloaded the data get that data in the form of a specially minted tokenized token that represents that data. And so that's how the exchange goes back and forth between two different types of tokens. And I was providing liquidity for these different tokens, because when you upload your data, basically it essentially mints a version of that data in a token form. And the tokenization is what represents the ownership back and forth of that. And that's kind of how that works. People don't really need to get into that nitty gritty, but that tokenization can help track where their data is, and then it can be fed back into the dashboard, and kind of show where it ended up. And that way people can keep track of the permissions that you guys are talking about, that I would think. Not sure I'm on the right track with that, but I think it's getting closer.
Yeah, I think that's the only limitation there is like that's not going to be all encompassing of like not all your data is going to like flow through a model like that. I think within particular ecosystems, there is like more or less tracking and auditability and everything. But to try and get like a holistic view of like no matter where this ends up, I can find it or like I can track it down, I think is the difficult part. That
Well, the transparency of the blockchain should be able to handle that, because you can look at the contract address for the token that represents your data, and you can see on the blockchain wherever that ended up. I mean, it may end up just be an anonymous wallet, but if there's some way using some kind of reputation system to identify those wallets, like for, you know, major companies or, you know, projects or something like that.
mm-hmm. Yeah, well, for example, you know, if and when I do the Ocean integration, then Republic users will be able to share their stuff on Streamer and Oceans. So, and if they share their stuff on Streamer, like that's not going to go to any blockchain, or it won't be tokenized in any way or whatever. So it's kind of like you're gonna, for the blockchain ecosystems, there's that traceability and everything. So I think we also want to account for like the legacy or just off-chain places that your people may want to share it, or it might just like go despite you not wanting to.
Is that the Streamer without the E, streamer.network?
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's the back end of the data unions right now, that we, if you go to the earn screen in the app.
Oh, I don't have the
Yeah.
app. So, but that's that essentially kind of that de facto, like RSS style decentralized news feed you showed me a couple months ago, correct?
Yeah, we use that for JournoDAO to
Yeah, that's right. That's where
publish
I saw
the
that before.
JournoDAO Twitter. Yeah. And it's great. It's just like a different use case. There's going to be, you know, as everyone kind of builds these different apps and incentives on top of personal data, then I think it'd be great if we could help people like interoperate with different things and explain to them what it is. Oh, okay. Bye, Crystal. Thanks for dropping in. Eric, do you have any thoughts so far? Are you in a place where you can talk?
My mind went to the same place as John's, which is that like yeah, Ocean Protocol is like the protocol that I think does this. I mean, in a way, like the system we're talking about is also kind of, you know, similar to setting up basically like a staking of your data, where I mean, I think that's basically what Ocean Protocol is doing. Like, you know, you can basically stake your data tokens in whatever service wants to use them, and you know, if you don't like what they're doing with your data, you can pull them out at any time. So those are like kind of the existing models I'm aware of where my mind went.
Yeah, and Summit, to your point about like certification, I think Data Union DAO is talking about that, where they give, you know, they give out some sort of label to their data unions that are members or that adhere to like the certain set of principles, and as part of that you stake capital into like their staking contract, and then you can be like, for bad actors, the data unions in the contract can basically vote to slash somebody's stake if they like misbehave or something. That kind of gives you some assurances that like everybody's playing by the same rules.
I observed that, and I thought that was a really interesting thing. It works as long as the value of the staked tokens is less than the value of misbehaving. sorry, is greater than the value of misbehaving. If the value of misbehaving is significantly larger than the escrowed tokens, then it just doesn't matter. You lose it, you may lose ongoing access. But at that point, I mean, we see this. I was a security guy for 15 years, so it's effectively like a bust out. Like I can build a significant user base, or I can buy or gain access to a whole bunch of data, and I can be a good actor until I have accumulated enough value that it exceeds the value of what's been staked. But anyway, there's no need to quibble on that. I think it's a really cool mechanism, and I think that it's an effective, relatively lightweight way to reduce the probability of bad action.
What do you think about doing our own set of, I don't know, trying to come up with a Republic like label or certification or approval of just whatever the DAO comes up with, as far as like, you know, we're going to be in the space evaluating these things anyway. Maybe it would be good to formalize that for other people and just say that we approve of these projects. Or
I think that's very helpful to actually say you as the user can approve any that you want, but the default, like the go button is you're getting this curated set of entities that are allowed to operate on your data, bid for it, buy it, do whatever it is, we write that all down. I think that's very helpful as a way to get started. Like I think that's a much better user experience than, okay, step one, go make your own independent assessment of all of these actors. You don't have the context or basis for making that assessment. So you either randomly say yes, or you're uncomfortable with what's happening, or you just vapor lock and say no to everything, or do nothing and stop using the app. I think to say, hey, we have a default, we're very careful, these are our principles, we carefully monitor and curate this, we'll eject people out of this, your data is automatically revoked from ongoing usage, or whatever the case may be. But a nice simple bundle that says, we stand behind this bundle, and you can just get started without really too much stress by hitting go on our curated bundle.
Yeah, I think there's a fine line too with that, because there's a lot of apps and websites that, you know, have the terms and conditions that you have to agree to. And of course, it's your choice, but if you really want to use the website, you have to agree to those terms and conditions. And so, a lot of data collection gets around the whole idea of consent that way. So it has to be like glaringly obvious that this is different from that, you know. And how would you make that to where people would actually stop and realize that there's a difference at the beginning of the website?
Mhm. Yeah, I think
I think that's a great point. I mean, sorry, go ahead, Keith.
No, I was just going to say it's going to come down to the details of how it's implemented, I think, but go ahead.
Well, I was just say I agree with you, John. I wasn't envisioning this as a take it or leave it. I was envisioning it as a, hey, power users, you can go say yes or no to every single thing you want. Feel free. Start at 0 and you add one at a time or en masse, like whatever the UI may enable, you can add whoever you want. Or if you are a new user, then why don't you start with our recommended bundle and then you can add more over time. So it's for sure, and anything can be misunderstood, anything can be misimplemented in a way that doesn't make it clear. But to your point, my goal, what I had in my head was something that just gives an easy path for new users and the full control path for power users.
Mhm.
Either in addition to Republic doing kind of a certification or something along those lines, or in lieu of, are there any other organizations out there doing any kind of certifications like this? I mean, Summit, I liked your analogy early on to, you know, there's ACLU, there's the free trade. I mean, there are a ton of different certifications for all sorts of different products already. Is there anything existing like that right now that we could use? Because there's something to be said for having an independent third party give the certification and not just Republic.
Mhm. The two that come to mind for me that might have some, I'd be interested to look at what the EFF does, if they offer any sort of like, I don't know, if you abide by these rules or do these things, you'll get some sort of stamp of approval from the EFF. Or an org I'm a fan of is Humane Tech. Have you seen them at all? They're the Center for Humane Technology, I think. Eric, you know about them, right? Do you remember the guy's name, Tristan Harris?
Harris, yeah.
Oh,
I'm,
yeah.
I mean, I'm curious why that organization wouldn't be Republic.
Yeah.
I mean, really, like if you want to make sure it's kind of in line with, the ethos and the vision that you're going for, like, I mean, these are very well placed organizations in the Web 2 world, but like, I mean, in terms of like where we're headed and this space, like, I mean, I think we're as well placed as anyone else.
I agree with Eric there, because at the point where we are, it's very fringe on the edge, and we're at a place to position ourselves as kind of the stewards of the common data, I don't know, repository or whatever you want to call it, because there's nobody else doing it right now. Oh, Electronic Frontier Foundation is EFF. Yeah. Okay.
I think that there isn't going to be one. There are going to be users who think alike with Republic, and there are going to be users who don't care at all about Republic's opinion and want the infrastructure, but they actually want to trust Tucker Carlson. And like, it's not our place to judge. So that's why I think that we can have a default. We can have whatever we want. We can have, this is our set of 20, 30, 40 recommended players, like whatever you want, or 5 players in terms of who should be allowed to buy your data. But I think we just have to, at least in my opinion, acknowledge that the act of choosing who to trust is itself a choice. Somebody wants to trust EFF, great. Somebody wants to trust ACLU, great. Somebody wants to trust Tucker Carlson, great. I mean, the Trump White House secretary's sister has created a dating network for conservatives. It's like unbelievable to me. It's amazing. Like, I guess rah rah. It's a big, complicated, messy world, and so I just think that there isn't going to be one entity to be trusted. Like, the moment you say trust us, 51% of the population will come say fuck you. Who are you to be trusted?
Well, I mean, a good way to build that trust is basically what you're saying, which is, I mean, Republic can offer its own seal of approval, but yeah, we're willing to also acknowledge these other seals of approval, be it from Tucker Carlson or Joe Biden or whoever.
Yeah. I mean, I just use those jokingly to represent like the diversity of thought, right? There are people who are going to want, I mean, it's almost guaranteed that what one group of people wants is precisely the opposite of what the other group wants. And they're both going to want their data to power like pretty differing, maybe even diametrically opposed agendas.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the Republic is, so far set up to be completely agnostic about the type of data, like conservative dating network, liberal dating network, doesn't really matter. Republic's not, like, there's nothing in the tech that's opinionated about that. It would just be, but I think we should be opinionated just on the use, like how are things stored, how is it being used, how does this company, like, what licenses do they agree to, what licenses do they provide, like what are their what's their business model. Like, I could see us disqualifying places just purely on like an ad driven business model, or maybe not ad driven specifically, but like a specific kind of targeting for ads, that sort of thing. And and I would just expand some, like in the app. I think it would be like, this bundle or whatever, but I also think that, kind of like what Eric was getting at, it could be a certification or like a seal of approval that, people apply for and that we grant, and that's kind of like separate from, there could be like, hundreds of Republic approved like data unions or platforms, but then like in the app there's like these 5 things that we think are like the most helpful to like your average user, and then like maybe over here like these 5 for power users, these 5 for like, do you have like 2 or more IoT devices in your home, then you're probably going to like these bundles over here, that sort of thing. But
I think that
do-
makes sense.
yeah, I do like the idea of breaking ground on some sort of like auditing or evaluation process on our part, where it's like, I don't know, if we get to a place where that has clout, that people would come to us and just kind of show us like their inner workings and how they're approaching things, what their business model is, and then we kind of give our seal of approval.
I think another way to think about this is nutrition labeling. So it isn't really for us to say that you should or shouldn't eat the Doritos. It's just for us to say everybody should know how many calories and carbs and sugars and polyunsaturated whatevers are in the Doritos or the yogurt or the thing. And so establishing the standard for what that looks like could potentially be pretty powerful, because while I don't like ads and I like to use Brave, so I'm probably with you, Keith, I think I could turn that around and just say, hey, what if the company that wants to do aggressive ad targeting rolls in and says, hey, yes, it's aggressive ad targeting, user, but we will actually pay you like 5 times what most of these other entities are paying you. There's a subset of users who are like, well, I sure would like 5x. That's more interesting to me. So I think that it's hard to really know what is right or wrong for every user. I think it's probably powerful to make clear what the trade-offs are and then to help users understand. And maybe as part of that nutrition labeling, you can also have like a red, yellow, green. So green is what we would consider like very mainstream, you can feel safe user. Yellow user, you should probably educate yourself. And red, we don't actually necessarily think that this is a typical idea. I hesitate to use judgmental words like good or bad. Like this is maybe like a 2 standard divs away from the norm, and you probably want a lot more monetization for this. So go forth, but be wary.
We don't see how this can go well, but it's your choice.
This is your data.
Yeah. Yeah, I like I wouldn't want to stop at just like the nutrition labeling, because I think in that analogy, like that gives a lot of room to actually like leverage that for like bad intentions, where it's like, okay, then we just have to make this stuff look good and then we can like do all this other stuff. So I think there is kind of, as long as there's that flexible like editorial kind of like red, yellow, green attached to it, I think that's good. If you, as soon as you start itemizing like this thing, like once you have this thing, like that's okay, then everyone will get that thing and then find other ways to do like all this.
Oh yeah, I mean
stuff
every
around it.
single thing that we come up with is going to be gamed
Yeah.
by bad actors. So like that's just an ongoing cat and mouse. But I think that just setting like low watermarks really help move everybody up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, that's awesome. I'm excited to kind of look into that more and see how that. Do any like? Do you think there's anything we can do now on that front to move that forward? Like any actionable steps?
I mean, I think like maybe a basic step is to come up with what is the list of like characteristics, business practices, what have you, that would be on your like do not tolerate list. So like obviously like anything that's going to end land you in jail would be something. So like just as kind of like what is, in other words, what is the minimum bar for entry to the to the potential dashboard that we're talking about, and then deciding if Republic has beyond I'm assuming complying with the law, but I don't know, maybe we're all moving offshore soon. Like beyond that, like do you have like any non-negotiables?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that'd be a first thing.
I'm thinking like maybe we could start putting things into like red, yellow, green buckets. Also, maybe not just red, but also labeling stuff that like, this is definitely like something cool that people can do that we're in favor of.
I mean, what type of data are we talking about? Republic is mainly just personal data that is accumulated through somebody's phone via the app. So what could, I'm just trying to think of what could possibly be so crazy that it wouldn't be allowed. You know, unless somebody's like, I don't know, doing some like child porn type of stuff. I just don't see what's like illegal stuff from on their phone maybe, but really the point of the Republic app is to track your like movements, things like your health app, right? I mean, isn't that the majority of the data that it collects?
Well, yeah, no, that's a good point. I think one example might be um, just a lack of transparency. So, like, I think, so say you want to, there's a data outlet that we know about and we're putting in for like, because people might want it, like, or users are asking for it. But like, as far as we've looked into it, like, we have no idea what they're doing with the data. Like, they say this, but we can't like verify anything. Then in my mind, that would be like a red outlet or something where it's just like, we have no idea. Whereas like something that's labeled like green would be like, okay, like, their code is open source, we verified this, like, this is the stuff that we can actually like, say for certain about this. So it's like, we feel okay like recommending it.
So like, here's a real world example that actually happened, and maybe you read about this, but the fitness tracking app Strava takes everyone.
You're pretty quiet, Eric. Can you get closer to the mic?
It's probably this headset. So like the fitness app Strava takes like all its users' data and puts it on a heat map, just so you can see, what routes are like most popular for running, biking, whatever. And at one point, it became pretty clear that the heat map was revealing troop movements, because you would have soldiers deployed somewhere in Afghanistan, and like during their downtime, they were like all going jogging at the same place or something like that. So like and so the military wasn't thrilled with that. So like that's one potential thing to think about. If something similar were to happen and the Pentagon comes knocking at Republic's door, what's the policy? Like, do you comply or not? Like those are the kind of things that I was thinking about.
I think that's a great example. Sorry, good, Corey.
No, well, yeah, that is a great example. And I was kind of thinking, John, I wasn't thinking the user's data would somehow rely on illegality. It was more like so the person that's buying the data, if there was a entity that wanted to buy data that showed who was going to abortion clinics in that, the people that lived in states where abortion is now illegal, like, what do we want to clarify that? Do we want to make that clear? Is that violating some term of Republic or some law? I don't know.
Okay, so the color code system, red, yellow, green, is more based from the people who are wanting to buy your data instead of the people giving the data. Because from what I'm understanding, Republic is the majority that it would be the individual giving up their data to that platform, and then organizations and companies would be the ones buying that data. So the rating system would be more for the companies buying the data to alert us where it's going. All right, I think I'm getting a better understanding now. So what you're saying is maybe some anti-abortion organization wants to buy your data and track your movements. You would get a heads up about that, saying, here's XYZ organization, here's a little summary on them, do you approve, yes or no, kind of like that.
Right.
Maybe it could flag you, send you a push notification every single time somebody tapped into your data, and you get a little summary, a blurb of who's doing it and what, and every company or organization that wants to log into Republic has to give a little a summary of the organization, or at least just some URL.
Yeah, and that's something that we should talk about, whether like everything is opt-in or if there's like some sort of setting that you can kind of passively share to, like as long as there are new buyers that fit this criteria, I'm okay with them like accessing my data for, and like paying me to access it without me having to like approve every single one. There's some sort of automation there, but there is like an audit log, or like if there's somebody who's like actively pinging me who's kind of like outside of my preferences, then I would get an alert. Not that they are accessing it, but that they would like to, because they shouldn't, be able to access it if
Yeah, and then
if they're
maybe there could
outside.
be some kind of filtering wall that filters out illegal or organizations or companies, maybe foreign ones, that the United States would not like, spying on their U.S. citizens, for example, in like Eric's case, his example. So
Yeah, not his personal
yeah,
example.
no, not in Eric's case, but yeah.
No, that's good. Yeah, that gives me a lot of clarity on it.
I have to
Well, I
hop
mean,
off here in a couple
oh,
minutes, so
okay.
the recording will end. Just want to let you know. So.
Okay, cool. Well, everyone feel free to drop off. I can stay on for a few more minutes if anyone wants. Well, I guess maybe we wrap it here, or else if people do want to stay on, we could talk about that article about biometric psychography and the whole reason for Republic having a hyphen in the name. Because like as I went down this rabbit hole like years ago, just like throwing different use cases out there and stuff, it's like, well, okay, if I sit down in a restaurant and have a meal, then like who owns the data for the fact that like I was there, um, what I ordered? It's like, is that data like co-licensed with the restaurant, and in what way is that? Um, and then for public spaces, like, is there such a thing as like um, a public right? Like, does the commons kind of have a right to know who was where in these spaces? Um, is that making sense? Does that seem intuitive to people? Because that seems really like hairy to me. I don't really. Seems like we're gonna have to hash it out with a bunch of new norms and perhaps legislation.
I mean, a right to know a right to know other people's movements